Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. This episode, my guest is Marcia Socas, and we're going to talk about building a generational real estate legacy, because it came from her mom to her, even though she didn't know she was ready, and she has passed it on to her son. Now, this is on-market, off-market, investing, DIY. Let's go. This is episode 210 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Marcia Socas. Marcia is an on-market agent at Castro Realty Group, which is a company, but also a longtime real estate investor, budget home flipper with a lot of DIY and family experience. Marcia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on. And I like to talk legacy and involving our kids. And this is something that you've done the whole way with real estate. Am I right about that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, tell us how you first got interested in real estate, because I know it's been a long time of your interest, and then how you got, interested in doing that for your kid as well.
Yeah. So originally, my mom was actually a real estate broker here in Central Florida.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Many, many years ago, back in the 80s. And she had her own brokerage, which was great for her. And it was not something that I was interested in, something I had heard about. She would tell me about properties she wanted to invest in. She would drive with me to a neighborhood and say, "What do you think about this house? I think I'm going to buy it as a rental." And I just wasn't interested. I went off and I studied neuroscience, and I got a degree in neuroscience and an MBA, and went into hospital administration, and really was going down a different path.
Yeah.
But when I realized that my husband and I were pregnant with my son, I knew that I didn't want to stay in Miami, which is where I was living at the time. I wanted to be closer to home. I needed more help. And so I came home, and I couldn't just jump into another hospital administration position at that point.
Yeah.
So I went into real estate with my mom so that I could have the baby at the office and, all the convenient things that come with, kind of having that life in real estate where you can make your schedule a little bit more and things like that. And so once I started, I fell in love with it in a way that I could have never foreseen. I started to love, the negotiating, the looking for deals, the buying properties, everything about it. And so that is really how I started. I just thought I was doing it temporarily, and it has become an entire, life for me.
Yeah. I mean, it probably helped that it was both on market and investing, because that gives you kind of all the layers of the fun stuff. At the time when you got into it and started getting going, did you realize that you knew more than you thought you did because of growing up with your mom driving you around everywhere?
Yes, I did. I realized that all the things that she had been telling me over time kind of really came into focus a lot more. And it kind of, now that I think about it, is really the way that she taught me has led me to teach my son. I guess I never really thought about it that way, but she created the legacy in me first. And so that made it easier for me to pass it on.
Yeah, I had a similar journey. My dad was dragging me to rental properties left and right as a child. He wasn't an agent, but he was an investor who was just buying random stuff, introducing me to tenants. Do you remember back when you were younger, what you thought of it at all? Because you said it was just like another thing to do. But then when you look back now, it might have been like, well, actually, I was doing a lot more. Like, I met some people, I understood things earlier than I probably thought.
Yeah, I remember her talking to me about, just kind of looking at a neighborhood with her and talking about what the price was and how much she could rent it for, and just kind of going through that thought process of, did that make sense? Was it safe? Was it something that they wanted to take a risk on. And I think from some of the conversations I had with her at the time, my dad was not quite as on board with her.
Yeah.
And so I think she needed like a confidant and someone to talk to about these deals. And so she really did talk to me a lot about how to kind of invest in what she wanted to do and what was the right pricing for her and things like that.
Yeah. And as someone who now has done a lot of projects on their own, what do you love the most? Like, I just love houses. I like all of the kind of nuances of them. But you've done a majority of this in Florida, where traditionally a lot of the homes look the same. So you have to do a lot inside. Of course, there's other areas that are great. But if you take Florida as a place like Arizona, there's a lot of developmental builds where you're going to do most of the renovation on the inside and you can't really touch the outside. So how has that affected what you do in that context? Because it is a little bit of a different market.
Sure. Well, what I love to do here is renovate also the single family homes, just like you mentioned for yourself. I think you can just have so much fun, fixing them. But I will say, so one of the things I like about the single family home is I have tried to buy several homes in the neighborhood that I grew up in, which was a very kind of working class neighborhood, but with really solid homes and kind of larger yards. And it has made me extremely happy to renovate several of those homes and think about kids coming home to their house and they have granite countertops or they have like really nice new floors. Just things that I think that, would be nice finishes and things like that for people to be proud of and feel really proud of their home. So that kind of was a thing. I have to say, though, I've done several condos, and that is actually also a lot of fun because you have a different set of challenges. You have this really limited space.
Right.
And it's almost like there were some old design shows on TV where they would give like a different designers like an 8x10 box and they would tell them all to design it. And so it kind of feels that way. Like all of these condos look the same. So I have to do something really cool to make it stand out. And I don't have to worry about a roof issue, an exterior issue. Like all I have to worry about is the AC and the interior stuff. And so that has been kind of fun. But sorry to keep going on this, but now that you asked my favorite, I do realize I have a few different ones. As someone who has been a residential landlord for a long time, when I first got into a short-term rental property, which was really close, it was just 3 miles from Disney. Yeah. And that was a really cool thing to get into because the clientele was so different. Instead of people telling me kind of like what's wrong with their property or what needs to be fixed or why they're going to be a few days late this month or, just all the kind of myriad things that can happen with long-term tenants, it was people telling me how they were coming into town because their child won the thing of, the Girl Scout Award and somebody else coming because they were going to take their kids to Disney for the very first time. So those interactions and those experiences with those different kind of tenants was exciting as well. I think I find excitement in all parts of real estate, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, you're in an area that makes that available because you're in Orlando. So you have Disney, you have obviously a ton of tourism. You also have a lot of industry. So there's a lot of people who live there. It's also in the middle of the state. So people are always passing through and going through. So it gives you all the opportunities. And as someone who had both of my children's first birthdays and character breakfasts at Disney in Florida, I understand. And that is an interesting thing to do, though, because as you said, it's a different clientele. I feel like short-term rentals kind of lets you do the things that are over the top that you can't really do in a flip. Like you're not doing a game room to sell a house, but people would like a game room in a short-term rental. So it gives you this extra layer of creativity when you like it. Have you found that you can really do the things that, you wouldn't normally do and see if they work, it's probably going to be good? Yes,
you're 100% right. So in that one that I had that was by Disney, I got this wallpaper and it looked literally like stones, just like stones, like big boulders, like the inside of a castle. And I wallpapered this entire room that way and then put up some Harry Potter posters and paraphernalia, put red banners for the window curtains and then, red and yellow sheets and things like that, just to bring the colors all together. So when you walked in there into that particular room, it really looked like you were staying in a room in Hogwarts Castle.
Yeah.
And you could never do that in a property you're flipping.
That's taking a note from actual Disney. If you just look at how Disney's designed, there's separate sections for everything. So, if you do that with a short-term rental in this type of travel destination, that's your avatar. You're going for people who like Harry Potter and are going to Disney. You're not going to get two grandparents who just, oh, this looks interesting to stay in. Like,
Right.
you're making the niche smaller, but then your clientele is going to be better, and you know exactly why they're coming.
Yes. I figure if I'm going away somewhere and it's not the place I'm going to live all the time, it's fun to have it decorated really kind of outlandishly or have something totally different, because why not? I might as well get all into whatever the theme is for that area.
Yeah, and especially for what we said, a lot of the properties that are doing short-term rentals on the outside, they just look completely regular, just like the other houses around, or at least similar single families. But inside, you can just go crazy. And that's the fun part. And that's the experiential part of short-term rentals, especially when they can have it at the day. They don't want to come home to just when I started buying in Florida in the 90s, I was like, I would always look at it as like, which shade of ecru am I going to buy? Everything's just a random shade of beige. Of course it's changed, but a lot of the HOAs make the exterior harder. So it's more fun to do that on the inside.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me how you first started investing for the benefit of your son, because this is a really interesting story and something that you guys are still doing stuff together now. And I think it's a really smart principle of how you started your first investment for him and how it's continued.
Yeah. So when my son was born, I knew that I wanted to set up, the prepaid college fund, which now, back then it was called Florida Prepaid. And I think they may still have that. But now more typically you see people talk about a 529 fund that they put money into. And back then, the amount to purchase the 4-year university Florida Prepaid was about $7,000. And I had gotten that amount of money together in part due to, gifts that were, baby shower gifts and, new baby gifts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you were like, forget the baby camera. Just put cash in the box. Let's go. Yeah. Trying to get something here.
My parents, contributed because they wanted to make sure that my son had, was set up for a college education, which is great thing for grandparents to want to do. And I was ready to buy, just put the money down and buy the program. And my mom said to me, have you thought about doing this maybe differently? I'd like for you to consider using the money and instead of, putting it to buy the prepaid completely, use it as a down payment on a house and then use the monthly payment option for instead. Yeah. So that's what I did. I was able to, the house at that time, it was $88,000, which seems ludicrous today, but we're talking about 20 something years ago. Yeah. And this shows you the benefit of time. This is how time works. And so I was able to offer them a little bit higher so they would pay my closing costs. Yeah. And I could just make my money work as the down payment. I contributed my commission as well, which was at that point $2,700. So anyways, I had $9,000 then using the commission and, having them pay closing costs so I could put 10% down on the property. And the overage, the rent over the mortgage was slight. It was not very much, but the Florida prepaid was only $56 a month. I sent that in every month. Over time, though, something happened that I didn't really expect or didn't really kind of think about at the beginning is, rents go up over time. So after time, I started increasing the rent and then I started building up a cushion in the account. Yeah. And then I was still sending the Florida prepaid money out. And then I would take the extra rent and I would pay down the principal a little bit, once it kind of accumulated and whatever. Yeah. And so now what has happened is by the time he was ready to go to the university, it was fully paid for. He had a full prepaid college fund. And because I've been paying down the principal a little bit quicker, by the time, and I took advantage of refinancing when the rates were really low. Smart. By the time he is 25, he will have a house totally free and clear that I can then gift to him, whenever I want to. And right now the value of that house is about $350,000 last time I checked. So it's really kind of amazing to show how a little bit of money placed at the beginning can over time grow to be really life-changing, because that's life-changing for somebody,
Absolutely.
to start off with a $350,000 house, or, or just a nest egg like that is huge, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And even though houses are, of course, more expensive, it's a little less affordable now. You had
Yeah.
$8,800 that you got together to get that house, and now
Yeah.
the total value is at 350. So you've built equity, you've refied, moved some money around. But it provides that path, and also gives you a way to show, like, hey, look what I did. And
Yeah.
anybody can do this if they can afford it.
Yes.
If they can get the money together. I mean, now you can still get in there with an FHA loan in non-competitive areas, for something that's newer, and just get a property and let it sit. You did the classic Warren Buffett, buy real estate and wait, like just going to
Yeah.
wait it out. And then you found all of the good levers, though. Things are going to go up in rent. Property value is going to go up. Taxes may go up, but you're outpacing that in appreciation.
Yeah. 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 It definitely worked really well. I was very happy with it. And it's true. It's not something that is a no money down kind of situation. It did take money. It did take an investment. It did take savings to put it together and go into it. But, in reality, that is what most of real estate is. I think we hear a lot of noise about people talking about, getting rich with no money down and things like that. But I think in reality, those are kind of gimmicks. And, the more tried and true way is to really save some money, put it down, do it the right way, and, take your time, and it really works out in the end.
Yeah. And a note just from your baby shower: when people want to give you gifts, just get money instead. If you're I have 3 friends in law school who were asked, well, either going to buy you a house or we're going to give you a wedding. And they all chose wedding. And they all wish they chose house.
Yeah, I can't believe
It's a
they all chose
no-brainer.
wedding.
Well, you get in the thing,
Yeah.
they're 24, 25 at the time. They're like, hey, this sounds great. Let's have a big wedding. No, always take the house, take the money, get less gifts. You can always get, like we just went past Black Friday. You can just wait and get your baby camera then for the next year. Take the money, build a down payment. But this is why it's so interesting, because real estate is so accessible. Less accessible now because it's a little bit harder, but it really depends where you live. There's a lot of areas in the Midwest where you can really still get a house for $10,000 down. So these things are possible. People don't have to think it's an unachievable goal. And home ownership, you found this one that was just an investment property, but that's something that people may decide now to get an investment property and then still rent, just because it might make more sense for them depending on where they are.
Yeah, definitely. So my son, who's now 23, he has just bought his first home here in Central Florida. He bought a bank-owned foreclosure, and he's going to be, living there with roommates so that they will offset the mortgage. And, so it works for him in that way. Without them, I don't think it would really work.
Yeah.
Just because, he's young, and house prices are more expensive now. But when you're young, there are still creative ways of figuring out how to make it work, as long as you can kind of qualify for that mortgage or have a parent co-sign and help, that kind of thing. Then the same principles still apply. You might as well get in there and start building equity and having ownership as soon as you can.
Yeah, it's also super helpful to learn to live on your own, manage a property. There's a lot of kids who get 23, 25, they get out of grad school and they come live back home, which I love if my kids want to come live back home. I'm open to it just in case. But it's also nice to get them out there and start to figure out how to do it. You pave the path by getting them the first property that will grow. But now this is one that he's chose to do it himself. Probably needed a little work as well. And I assume he maybe has seen you do work on homes over the years and is ready to do it himself.
Yes, and he helped me flip a condo when he was younger. So it's been a lifetime of kind of teaching him how to invest as well, which has been great. Very fun for us to build a close relationship, and very good for him as well in terms of learning how to invest and make money and structure his kind of path with real estate going forward.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. So you've done short-term rentals, and then recently you went off into midterm rentals as well in the area. So what are your favorite parts of real estate? Like, you have long-term rentals, short-term rentals, midterms. Do you like them all? I mean, or is there one that you think you may start doing more as you acquire more?
I do like them all. I like anything that's a good deal and that I can, because it's such a win, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you get it's just that part of it is such a great feeling. And so I do like them all. I like different aspects of all of them. I like talking to people with the short-term rentals because they're very nice and happy. Even the midterm rental ones are, they're nice as well. Yeah. But I love changing something, like arriving in a place in the morning and like doing some work and some things and changing it by the end of the day. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes in that. So I know a lot of people, they just like to invest and not necessarily DIY their own renovation. And certainly there are some things you can DIY and some you can't. But when it comes to these things that are kind of cosmetic and just make a place look really good, that's a lot of fun to see that before and after. And I love taking before and after photos of kind of all the different projects.
Yeah. And I think with short-term and midterm, it's so interesting because you get direct feedback. So someone can, your first short-term rental stay may say, hey, you only have 2 knives. And they're like, oh my gosh, like your first 10 stays, I always say for short-term rentals are all learning experiences, because those are the comments that can help you out. And even with midterm rentals, because people are staying longer, you have to adjust. A lot of people go from short-term to midterm and they overdo it. But midterm, they don't need as many amenities. They just need a really comfortable place, quiet, good Wi-Fi. It's a different vibe between those two.
Yes, you're 100% right. And the feedback is essential, especially at the beginning. And I think I've been fortunate in that I've had some really nice tenants in some of the places when I'm starting out who very kindly told me that maybe I didn't have a single can opener anywhere in the property.
That's I always send friends first. I always say at least 5 friends, just send them for free and tell them to write down everything that you're missing and you'll never be sorry.
Yeah. And what I have found is that people really appreciate kind of honesty and communication. Yeah. So when I tell somebody, look, you're my first, person here in this condo and, let me know if you need anything because I will send it to you via Amazon by the next day. I promise I will take care of it. I just, sometimes there are things that slip through the cracks and they're very nice about feedback. And then at the end, when they leave and it's time for a review, I ask for the 5-star review. I say, if you like it, I really hope that you'll leave me a 5-star review. And I have noticed that asking for it makes a huge difference. When I didn't ask for it, then I got, some 4s, some 5s. But when I asked for it, they always put a 5.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the agent game as well. I learned that very early on in the agent game. Somebody said, never ask for a Zillow review. Make sure you ask for a 5-star review. It's the same for short term. And if there's anything that happened that didn't indicate 5-star, let me make sure I can cure that for you before you get there. So you kind of do that. And I think that is really important because if you don't say that, I think that people are smart enough to know they're hurting you if they give 4 stars. But there's people who are like, well, there was one aunt. So 80% is pretty good. And you're like, well, you don't understand how the algorithm works. This one aunt has just corrupted my algorithmic integrity. But that's why the hospitality end is so important. And it seems like you really like that as well, being a part of it, making sure people have a good stay, because it's not always easy. Sometimes you just get a difficult person, just like as an agent, you get a difficult client. They seem nice at first, and then you're like, wow, this was a mistake.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So how's the crossover been for you as an investor and an agent? I always ask this of my guests who are licensed. If you were a real estate investor now, would you get your real estate license if you weren't sure if you really wanted to do agent business? Do you see value in having the license as an investor? And then I'll tell you what I think because it's changing all the time.
Yes, I would 100% recommend someone do get their license. And there are a couple of reasons. One being, obviously, if you have access, not only get your license, but then become a member of your local board so that you can have access to the MLS because things are so much quicker in terms of seeing the deals come online and you can do your comparative, your comparable sales so much easier using the system.
It's not even close. You can't, people think you can use Redfin, which has the best data, but they don't have all the solds. A lot of areas don't post the solds or they don't syndicate. So it's like a quarter to a half of the options.
Yes, it's not the same at all. And, the access to kind of the other agent, which you can find online as well. But I I can see their private remarks, that they have in the listing and things like that. And that's very helpful. And the other thing that's been helpful, and I'm no accountant, but the accountant seems, says that because I have my real estate license, then I'm an active investor instead of a passive. And so that leads to a larger tax benefit. So there's that part of it as well. So I would definitely think that anyone should get their license.
Yeah. For small scale multifamily, having access to the MLS is unbelievable because you can see the rent rolls. The rent rolls are never pushed out onto the portals. You can't see them unless they put it in the description. So you can literally be vetting so many more deals just by having access. And access space, they always say access is twofold for investors because now you can just go see every dump that comes up. Like you said, oh, look, I would just run a search for a price point that is dumps in the area and go see every one because most of them are going to be vacant. So even if you're, not really doing agent business, you just set an appointment, you're a licensed agent, you go in, let yourself in, look at the property, and then that helps you get some reps, which I feel like now investors are not getting enough of because technology is much different now than when your mom was an agent. And when I started to look with agents, there was no internet. We had, an MLS. It was a book. Yeah. And it had no pictures, or it would have like one black and white thing that you're like, what is that? And it was just the front of another beige building. So you're like, well, this isn't helpful. And it really was a crapshoot when I used to go look in Florida when I started buying in my early 20s, because you didn't know what you were going to pull up to. You really had no idea. It wasn't as technologically advanced. Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Marcia Socas, and we're going generationally. You heard how it went from her mom to her, down to her son. That's really what most people are thinking when they start in real estate. They think income, financial freedom, generational wealth. If you're interested in getting started and you don't know how and you've tried books and podcasts, the one thing that will accelerate your learning beyond all others are real estate investor meetups. You can go to Bigger Pockets, look in the events and meetups. You can go to meetup.com, see what's out there, find real estate investor meetups where there's no pitch, and you will find your future partners, friends, and develop the camaraderie that you need. Let's get back to Marcia. So are you finding also that you think people can just, to be able to go look at every dump on the market, you can get so much experience just by looking at stuff, smelling it, asking other people questions, that you can get way ahead, way faster as an investor, I think.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's nothing like knowing the neighborhood and knowing, what's going on there, what's coming up, so my husband does not have his license, but he likes to do the renovations with me. And he decided to go kind of look for something on his own. And he was driving through a neighborhood, saw a house that had gone through a fire. And so he came home, he looked up the house, saw that it had been listed, contacted that agent and, said, I just want to know kind of what happened to that house. And he said, well, that house sold, it's not available, but I have another one. I work with people, that have been through, probate. And so I have this one not on the market. And anyways, he ended up, securing a deal on his own, which I was, very happy for him, doing. And it was because of driving around. It was literally just because he drove around and wasn't afraid to make a phone call.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's an interesting thing. If we look back at real estate then when you were growing up and going with your mom and when I was going with my dad, my dad was the smartest investor I've ever known. And everything that he does, I can still do. I just have the advantages of technology. But as much as I'm a big proponent of using technology in my real estate investing game, I don't use it as much as other people. I use spreadsheets to do a lot, but I because I've seen so many houses, I need to go see the house. Have you ever had, and you probably get out of state investors who want to invest in Florida and they never want to come there. And it's always like a little bit hard for me to say, you've never been here. I can't make choices for you. I really want you to know the area. How do you feel about that? Because Florida is obviously a hotbed for out of Florida investors.
So it is, it's like a large weight is placed on you when someone does that because you don't want to disappoint. And they're it's always a big decision. I have had several buyers purchase that way, especially, during the pandemic, because people were going to move here, but they couldn't visit here. So, I did use the technology and send, full walkthrough videos that were super long and detailed. And, because you don't want to be the one. And, fortunately, in every case where someone purchased that way, they were happy. One time I was really nervous because it was a house that had like a big swale in the back. And I kept saying, it's a big it's kind of like a ditch. Like it's big here. And I want to make sure. And I tried to take pictures from different angles and things like that because you just feel so responsible. And then when they came, they said, it's exactly like you said it was. And we're fine with it. And, the setbacks are here and we're going to do this. And, so it was all good. But yes, very nerve wracking to have people buy that way. And sometimes, like I said, anyone who's purchased that way, it has worked very well. But I've also lost clients that way, people who didn't want to come down, and I try to send videos and do stuff. And then they just, felt like I didn't give them enough communication, or I didn't talk enough about, enough to them on the phone about what the house was like. And I think, well, I just spent 44 minutes there sending you a video. So, when people have purchased, it's been good, but I can't say it's always been a perfect scenario when someone wants to buy, sight unseen from out of town.
Well, let's talk Orlando real estate just for a second, because I think it's an area that a lot of people are interested in because it has the proximity to Disney, but also there's so much stuff to do there. I mean, if you want to have anything to do, you can go to Orlando and be fine for as long as you want. What's the market been like, and what's it like for investors coming into the area? Because I know there is a good amount of new builds, even though there's less room than there used to be. But that's a good option now with the insurance costs in Florida, is to buy a new build investment property. Your insurance costs are going to be a little bit better, and you're going to be built to a better standard given, Orlando's, of course, in the middle of Florida, so it's not on the coast, but you still get the ones coming from each coast going over to the other coast.
Yeah, we still have the effect on our insurance rates, so
of course,
I will say that this year has been a significantly slower year for me in terms of sales. I look at, as I mentioned, my background was in science, and then I got a business degree. So analytical, data is very appealing to me. So I do like to look at all the numbers and, not just numbers of a particular house, just how the entire area is doing in general, which our board provides. And I assume probably most boards provide on a monthly basis. And in looking at that, last time I looked at it, which was last month, inventory has risen so much. I think it was at its 5-year high for the area.
Wow.
And it's very interesting to me right now because I see that there's a lot more inventory, but I don't see home prices going down. I don't see sellers kind of slashing prices. And I feel
agree.
We're kind of at this weird place where sellers are like, well, home prices always go up, every month by $3,000. And I think as an agent, it's like, well, no, there's the buyer's markets and sellers markets. And right now there seems to be a shift. So I don't see pricing coming down. So I'm seeing homes sit on the market for longer. I do see that the buyers I do work with, we are able to negotiate more terms. Whereas, as in the past couple of years, there was a time where we couldn't even put an appraisal contingency on some of these things. So
you had to waive everything just to win, which is, another fool's errand there.
Yeah. So that has changed a lot. I think that right now the pricing is, I look to see, can I find something that I could hold long term? Because I do like the flips. But I think that the long term kind of growth in wealth comes from the long term holds. And I'm having a really hard time finding them. And just because the rent that people will pay for this particular house, the numbers don't really work out the way I want them to right now. So to be honest with you, I'm kind of waiting to see what's going to change here, because something's got to change unless everyone's just going to keep moving to Florida, and then I'll have to find a different market to kind of start investing in, or go a little bit further out. St. Cloud is starting to develop quite a bit. So that may be another option, or west if you look at Groveland and those areas. I don't know if you're real familiar with that, just kind of west of Claremont still. those are areas that they have traditionally been thought of as way out there. But now when you drive by on the turnpike, you see all these builders have been pumping money into the areas and really developing them. So I think it's one of those things where you have to spread.
Yeah, and those are going to be affordable. I mean, if you go out a little, you're looking at new builds for like 200 grand, right? Still.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's the interesting thing. You can still get to Florida where a lot of people retire. Maybe you're not in the exact spot you want, but if you can get a new build for 200, it's not going to go down.
Yes.
You know, so if you can just hang on and then figure it out, I think that's the interesting part. There's so many options for new builds that it's just if you're going in. One thing I think about the inventory, it's interesting that the inventory is going here. We have zero inventory in New Jersey. Really? I mean, none. And the prices are just astronomical. But I think a lot of Florida, with my experience there for 14 years, a lot of the homeowners are second home it's their second home. So they have enough money where they don't have to sell. So they just figure, well, which is silly to me. Like it's just sitting there empty and you could take 10,000 less and then not have it sit for a year. Seems like a good idea to me, but people get a little stubborn, like you said, and their expectations are it'll sell eventually, but then more inventory comes, more competition.
Yeah. And I mean, I have fallen victim to it as well. I earlier this year purchased a condo over in St. Petersburg that had suffered from some water damage, not from a storm, but there had been an AC leak or whatever. So a lot of people didn't want to touch it. But for me, it was perfect because it had already gone through remediation and a lot of the drywall and all the flooring was out. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. Great. Like, this is what I want. So we fixed it up. And, I am, I guess, at this point, one of those sellers because I'm like, well, if I'm not going to get the price I want for it, it's a condo kind of, in a community on the water. I'll just Airbnb it or, rent it for a couple of months, kind of like the midterm rental market. And that's what I'm doing with it because so I guess the person I'm complaining about is also me in this scenario.
You have a pivot though. And I think the coolest thing about short-term becoming more openly popular, even though it used to be just timeshare and short-term in Florida has been going on for 50 years. I used to stay at short-term rentals every time I went, but having these options make it so you can make a purchase and say, oh, you know what? This flip, it's not ready. The market's not ready. There's too much inventory. You can make a decision. I can long-term rent it for this. I can do short-term, more turnover, a little bit more management, but I can probably make 1.6 to 2x. Midterm, I can make 1.4x less management, easier tenants. You can really start to say, hey, I have some choices here. I have 3 different choices that I can make for renters if I can't sell. And that gives you a lot of secondary options as an owner.
Yeah. And I think that knowing that and recognizing that when you hold the asset, you hold all the cards, in reality, is important to know as a real estate investor, because sometimes I think if something weird happens in the market or something, like back when all the pricing went down and all that stuff, people panicked. But in reality, if you've already got your mortgage and you've already got your tenant, why are you panicking? Just really calmly think through the options and realize that you have all the cards in your hand because there's nothing you have to do. There are so many different things you can do with a piece of property that, options are really important to kind of weigh and see that you have them all the time.
Yeah, I think the one mistake people make is in the expectations. When you go to flip a property, you're obviously, if you're flipping to sell and not trying to just do a quick flip to rent, you're going to put in nicer finishes than a traditional rental. So sometimes your finished product can't get the amount of rent that you would hope because you were shooting for a flip to sell. So it's still going to be a nicer rental, but it may not be like the rental market just may not be there for that type of product because they would be fine with a little bit less on the countertops,
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Yes. So you have to almost accept like, okay, well, our backup strategy might net a little bit less, but it's going to keep us fine because then maybe our sale price will be higher in a year or 2 years.
Yeah. We had an unexpected experience in a property that when my son was in high school or just finishing high school, we got a property. It was like the down payment on it was a gift to him for graduation. Just a 3% down payment on a small condo. At the time, the condo was $67,000, which was just a couple of years ago. It wasn't that long ago. And then the pandemic hit, and then the tenant that was there said, I've lost my job and I'm moving out of state. And, it was kind of one of these things where you can panic and say, oh my gosh, now I've got no income, the HOA fee here. There's 2 HOAs in this condo association.
Welcome to Florida.
So it's expensive. And what are we going to do? And this and that. But, if you really just we had to calmly just kind of analyze the situation and say, well, what can we do? And then his university was closed due to COVID anyway. So said, well, we're going to learn how to flip a condo, we'll be there on our own doing stuff, installing vinyl plank flooring and painting walls and whatever. And we ended up flipping it, and he turned a really tidy profit.
That's
so
awesome.
What was a really kind of nerve-wracking thing at one moment, a couple months later was, a really exciting result.
Yeah. I mean, this is real estate. It's tangible, it's tradable, and you can do value add to add more, your sweat equity and the money that you put in can get money out. It's a great asset. And you proved it just by doing that. And that's a small condo, 67,000. I mean, that's something that's generally achievable for the majority of people, a 3% down payment on 67,000. And then you're right, because a lot of people would panic with the double HOA. Hey, what do I do? The first thing I thought is, seems like a good time to do a renovation, because anytime a tenant moves out unexpectedly, I think, well, that means you just had the opportunity to upgrade it, and then you're upgraded for the longer term.
Yeah. Yeah. It turned out to be a great experience, really. Again, started as a nerve-wracking one, but, it was great. And we ended up selling the unit at 105. And
nice.
So it was, and it went under contract the first day it was on the market. So it was.
Yeah. Well, that another thing specific to Florida, which is how I learned how to flip on my own with my first one, is a lot of times when you have larger developments in Florida of any type of HOA con, as we were saying before, the outsides all look the same. So you could have 50 to 70% that haven't been upgraded since the build date, because the people just like it. So then when you upgrade one, you all of a sudden go from, hey, there's 6 in here that are available, 5 are old and 1's brand new, and there's people waiting for it. And that's kind of the challenge. And that's why condo buying in Florida can actually do really well, because you just have to beat the other people who don't want to do anything.
Yes, definitely. When you look to buy a condo here, you can kind of, when you look at the sales and you can see that there's like a $25,000 swing, you know that, okay, there's a difference there just in the finishes, because the size is all the same and the floor plan's all the same. So you know that, okay, if I'm strategic and smart about how I kind of just fix this up, kind of dress it up and make it a nicer product for someone, I can turn a tidy profit, and pretty quickly. A condo's a pretty quick flip.
Yeah. I mean, I bought what was basically a single family house, but it was in an HOA development. But the houses look so similar that I would come home and press the garage door, and it would open 3 doors down. And I'd be like, I don't know how this is happening. But all I did was recarpet, swap the appliance, paint everything, and just make it perfectly clean. And I think I also made the choice, which I'm sure you've done, just I can tell from your experiences. I didn't paint everything just white. I made the rooms a color. I gave it a little bit of personality, but it cost me nothing. And I made like $25,000 in a year. And I was like, oh, this is what my dad was doing the whole time growing up. Now I get it. And I think it's interesting because a lot of investors are scared of condos because of the HOA, but there's a way to play condos, especially in these type of developments, as we're saying, where you can do really well. If you see 6 available properties when there's 300 properties, you have some leverage, because you can use them all against each other to see who wants the deal and see which is the worst one.
Yep, absolutely. And you're right. Yes. Nothing is just like all, vanilla colored walls. It's, the fun of it is changing it. And I started having so much fun with it. And then I started like making videos because, here's how you can change a bathroom for $500. And I thought, I'm going to make these videos because they're, I'm 50 something years old. I'm not a contractor. I'm not, in stellar shape. I'm just like a regular lady. Yeah. And if I can do this, if I can add, this wood and then paint it and create this whole like picture molding wall and, all these different things, you can do it too. Anybody can do it. And, so kind of making the videos made me do a little bit more in some of the properties I was doing, because then I had an audience, right?
Yeah. Now I really have to perform.
Step up my game.
Yeah. But it shows, I mean, you can, especially when you're talking again about condos, the small things can have a big impact because you're up against people doing nothing. And I think it's the same in the short-term rental world. I don't think in the context of where you're doing short-term rentals and it's a condo, you don't need a game room. You just have to make it a lot nicer than anything else that you see out there on Airbnb, so people will choose yours over theirs. That it's pretty simple.
Exactly.
Yeah. Florida is a very interesting market, and I think it's one that never stops doing business because a lot of people want to go there. It's Florida and Arizona, really. I mean, people are moving to Texas, but when you get older, a lot of people want to go to Florida and Arizona. And I mean, it's a great place to live. I lived there for 14 years, a little hot for my taste. But, I used to be out in the people who aren't from Florida will know this. I grew up in New York, and then in Florida, it would be 55 and I would be outside in shorts and a t-shirt, and all the Floridians were like wearing snow hats and jackets. I'm like, what's wrong with you? This is crazy. You're probably one of those. You're like, I got to get the hat on at 55.
Oh, yeah. We ladies bring out our nice jackets and boots when it's like 65. It's like, oh, it's so cold. I'm going to wear my winter wear. So we don't have a chance otherwise.
Yeah, right. Well, that's true, though. You do need to get it out. Like the coldest day when it's 42, it's the best time to at least break out the gear once, like you're going skiing. So across the board from your history, what's your favorite kind of asset? I mean, what do you like to do the most if you just had to choose one thing?
If I had to choose one, I would say a long-term rental,
Nice
long-term ownership of a single family home, because, any money I put into it is going to be worthwhile later. And it, just the continued equity growth has been so significant in my experience. And even though the flips, they are fun. But, they're a lot of work in a very compressed amount of time. And sometimes the profit's really nice, but it's not, they're not always earth shattering profits. They're really not. And so sometimes I feel like I've hurried and worked and, just to kind of like, okay, this is good. I would never complain. But, I kind of like more the long, slow and steady way of gaining equity, having nice tenants, providing a good home, and having something that has appreciated in value over time that then I can, pass on.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, obviously generational wealth has been important to you. Your mom taught you, you taught your son. I'm doing the same. I think it's great. And, I think everybody can do it. Like you said, if you just start saving and you get that first property, you're going to turn around at college time and it's going to be paid for whether they want to go to college or something else. And you're not tied to doing it. It's money for them to use and invest and maybe turn into 2-3 houses after that time frame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the one thing I haven't done, and I bring it up because I'd like to know if you have done it, especially, because we're talking about being here in Florida.
Yeah.
I haven't yet, but I would kind of like to purchase in a 55 and older community.
Yeah, I haven't. I know someone who's doing it right now and doing a reno because, so as you know, the most important thing on the 55 and over renovation front is if you're 55 and over, can you buy? That's the segment because a lot of them will allow flips if you're going to turn it, if you're not 55, but then there's some where you cannot purchase unless you're 55 and over. Both give good leverage, but I think it's an interesting thing because I think that's where, of course, downsizers go. And I think similar to our condo conversation, imagine the 55 set. They generally all look the same, probably pretty boring in general. And then if you make one that much nicer, I think you can sell it. And those people, a lot of those buyers are cash buyers if they're moving to, a downsize home.
Yeah, I think I might want to rent it though. Because I think that what a great population, they have
snowbird it.
Yeah. Typically they'll have, some kind of steady retirement income. And I don't know, seems like something I'd like to try next, I think.
Yeah, actually, if I look back at my relatives who always travel back and forth, I think there's a lot of people in the Northeast who would rent it for a year and use it for 6 months. And they just say like, hey, the other times maybe we'll go down or we'll send a friend, or something. Right. But I think it's doable and I like it. I mean, I think that's being Florida savvy. It makes sense for where you are, who's going to be there, who's coming there. and what our population in America is doing right now, which is having less children and getting older. Not us, we're getting younger, but the other people are getting older and not having kids. So awesome. Marcia, is the best place for people to get in touch with you at your website, which is marciasocas.com. That's MarciaSocas.com.
Yes, that's it. That's the best way to get in touch with me and, look at any before and afters. I try to put on there also when we've done a flip, kind of the actual numbers. Here's what we put into it. Here's how it came out. And, here's what we really made kind of thing. And here's how long it took.
Transparency is really important. And I think it helps people connect more to know like, hey, you can't hit a home run on everyone. Right. And honestly, look, if you make some profit, that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's solid. You want to make more, but it depends on what type of property you're buying and what your turn time is. And if you encountered any issues along the way. Yeah. So they can get in touch with you there if they want to learn about investing, or also if they want to work with you as an agent, they can find you there as well, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. I love talking generational wealth and children and real estate. So I'm glad to have gotten you on the show, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Me too. That was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. All right. That was Marcia Socas. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on the next episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. The next episode, my guest is Jose Berlanga. Jose is an entrepreneur, author, and developer. His book is The Business of Home Building, so that should tip you off right there. We're talking land development, luxury, custom homes, and he's been in it for a long time. See you next episode with Jose.